Before there were cities, before civilizations carved their names into stone, Earth had already endured endless cycles. Ice melted, then returned. Volcanoes erupted, cloaking the sky in ash. Forests spread wide, then retreated, yielding to plains of dry grass stretching to the horizon. In that shifting canvas, small creatures began to change. Not with fangs, nor with the force of muscle, but with slow steps upon two legs, with eyes that could gaze beyond the dense canopy, and with hands that grew ever freer. Footprints pressed into volcanic ash in Afroclines of the first script. In an epic never written in words, from those steps a journey unfolded. A journey lasting millions of years, passing through Australopithecus beings who walked between sparse woodland and open grassland. Homo habilis, the toolmakers, who struck stone, Homo erectus, the fire-bearers, who carried flame beyond Africa. And along the way, countless branches appeared, flourished, then vanished in silence. This is not only the story of human ancestry, but the story of Earth itself, of rains and withering droughts, of climates that drove back forests and opened savannas, of lands where predators and prey circled in the dance of survival. And amid it all, a fragile lineage emerged from the shadow of the forest, slowly becoming the one that would write the history of this planet. Each chapter of this journey reveals a fragment of time, sometimes a violent moment, volcanic ash dimming the skies, the sun-scorching, parched grasslands, a single fossilized footprint capturing an instant that tells of millions of years. Sometimes a quiet one-an evolutionary branch falling into decline, leaving behind only dust and stone beneath the earth. Today, viewers retrace the path back to those origins, listening to the echoes of buried ages, witnessing the first sparks of human history. Join Origins, the human saga, where each chapter opens like a door into 4 million years of evolution. Subscribe to the channel so no fragment of this journey is missed, where past meets present, and where our eyes behold the birth of humankind. Around 5 million years ago, Earth's climate entered a long transformation. The stable warmth of the Miocene gave way. Air grew drier, winters colder, summers harsher. Long days of blazing sun seared the land, drying soil until it cracked in broad plates. Vegetation lost its green, revealing pale earth beneath. Rain did not vanish, but it grew erratic. Some years, vast regions endured months of drought, waiting for sudden storms. When rain came, it poured violently, flooding dry riverbeds, rushing with force before vanishing again. Flash floods stripped away topsoil, filling low basins with debris. Soon after, moisture disappeared, leaving hardened clay and fine dust. Carried off by wind. Winds shifted too. Monsoons weakened, while dry gusts swept down from the interior. They scoured plains and highlands, carrying red dust and fine sand that veiled the horizon. In dry seasons, the sky could remain shrouded for days, sunlight filtering through in a harsh yellow glow. Tectonic uplift in East Africa made the climate harsher still. Wide plateaus shed rain quickly. Lakes once deep and broad shrank. Shorelines receded, leaving cracked mud rings. Reeds, aquatic grasses, and lakeside groves withered, leaving only traces of desolate shores. Other forces scarred the land. Earthquakes struck repeatedly as rifts widened. Rivers shifted course. In arid zones, wildfires raged. A single bolt of lightning from a dry storm could ignite entire forests, reducing woodlands to blackened ash carried away on the wind. The landscape became a harsh tableau. Summers like molten fire, brief, violent rains, choking dust storms, disasters of flood, quake, and flame. This was the climate, the stage that shaped ecosystems of the early Pliocene. The upheaval etched itself not only into the land but into life. As lakes receded and forests broke into fragments, new spaces opened under the harsh sun and dry winds. Grasslands spread, thorn scrub thickened, and scattered groves marked remnants of ancient forests. In this terrain, life had to adapt. Where shade once covered the ground, open light now revealed every step. Scarce waterholes became centers of movement, drawing all forms of life across wide ranges. Drought and fire stripped away shelter, but cleared paths for new communities. It was a threshold moment. Nature both harsh and filled with opportunity. On this dusty ground, under volatile skies, species were forced to adapt. And here begins the story of the animals of the early Pliocene, across the arid East African plateau. Cracked earth stretched like scorched skin, fine dust rising with the heavy steps of passing creatures. Straight-tusked elephants moved ceaselessly in search of food and water. Their trunks pulled leaves from stubborn shrubs, gnawed dry branches, or pried at baked earth to reach roots. At times, they coated themselves with mud to cool the body, shield skin from burning sun, and drive away insects. Prolonged drought thinned resources, forcing herds to travel hundreds of kilometers each week, cross cracked plains, low hills, and barren gravel lands. Dust clung to skin and hair, straining breath and draining strength. Yet the herd pressed forward, moving in coordinated ranks to protect calves from predators. The leader took the front. Large adults formed a shield. The young kept close within. All followed a rhythm of survival shaped over millions of years. Their thunderous steps reverberated across the plateau, a reminder that life on the savanna allowed no delay, no straying at the same time. Three-toed horses moved in steady cadence, their hooves striking the dry ground with swift but light rhythm. They searched out patches of fresh grass, grazing constantly while scanning the horizon with wide, watchful eyes. At the first sign of threat and unseen predator, a shift in the wind, the herd reacted as one, flowing into long lines, body angled low for balance, minimizing the chance of attack. The sound of their hooves merged with the whisper of wind across dry grass, weaving a rhythm of survival upon the savanna. Through this focus and coordinated motion, the horses maintained nourishment and safety, honing their adaptation to a land of burning sun and swirling dust. Ancient antelopes spread across the plains in herds, chewing steadily on grass and shrub leaves to sustain their energy. Ears erect, eyes scanning wide, the herds detected predators from afar and reacted at the first sign of disturbance. Prolonged dry seasons forced them to alter their routes each month, traveling farther toward areas that still held water or fresh shrubs. The older animals led the way, the young followed closely within, learning to read the landscape. Bodies tensed, ready to leap aside when danger struck, adjusting speed to avoid separation from the group and to maximize access to food. Throughout the journey, the herds moved in coordinated rhythm, balancing feeding with constant vigilance in the lowlands near water sources. Primitive bovines waded into mud to cool themselves, grazing on dry grasses, standing together to guard their calves and expanding their range as drought endured. They moved in groups, the elders guiding, the young secured in the middle, each step a calculated choice, seeking land with water without losing the cohesion of the herd. The pounding of hooves on cracked ground echoed across the grassland, a warning of predators' presence. Despite drought and burning sun, the bovines maintained their rhythm of life, protecting the calves and exploiting every patch of remaining food, embodying survival knowledge accumulated over generations in the shade and thorn scrub. Saber-toothed cats waited in ambush. Muscular frames and agile bodies allowed sudden bursts of power, targeting the weak, the aged, or the isolated. When food grew scarce, their territories expanded. Hunts shifted toward dense shrubs, sunken basins, or scattered grassland patches. Each movement was calculated to avoid clashes with other predators, such as giant hyenas or short-faced cats. In the hunt, strength, speed, and patience converged. Every leap a decision of survival. Giant hyenas moved in groups, each individual taking a role: lookout, feeder, protector of the young. As the dry season stretched and carrion grew rare, they roamed farther, across cracked grasslands and barren soil, adjusting their strategy using shade, night cover, or depressions in the earth to conceal themselves, awaiting opportunities. Every meal became vital, a reservoir of energy that determined endurance for the day, reflecting survival strategies honed over countless generations. Short-faced cats slipped quietly over cracked ground, their bodies gliding low, choosing shade, low shrubs or shallow ridges for ambush. Flexible frames and sharpened muscles powered swift attacks, while keen eyes swept the plains, ready to strike when prey appeared. As drought deepened and food sources dwindled, they expanded their hunting ranges, altering ambush sites and tactics. To sustain energy, each step, each leap carried the weight of strategy, a survival pattern etched through time. Long-necked giraffes stepped delicately, necks stretched high to browse leaves from shrubs unreachable to others. Movements were slow yet steady, dispersing across dry plains to reduce competition, seeking clusters of green leaves still lingering. As grasses withered in drought, the herds broke into smaller groups. The old lead, the young followed, learning to read environmental signs for food and danger. Footsteps blended with the wind across brittle grass, a rhythm of survival on the savanna. Each reach for leaves, each step through thorns, a record of experience passed through generations. Crescent-tusked boars rooted the soil for tubers and underground plants to sustain themselves. Strong tusks tore through hardened earth, overturning clods, leaving tracks for others to follow toward safe paths. At signs of threat, the animals sprinted across open ground, combining vigilance with speed to secure survival. Beneath scorching sun, in dust-choked air and cracked soil, the boars persisted, extracting energy from roots. Their rhythm of life marked by caution and sharp awareness balancing the use of natural resources with the demands of survival. Amid this web of survival, Australopithecus emerged walking on two legs, hands free to gather stones, pick fruit, or collect dry leaves for food. Movement was cautious yet persistent, each step gauging distance, each pause measuring unseen threats from predators. They ranged far in search of water, coordinated in groups to protect their young, stood upright to scan the terrain, freeing their hands for gripping and rudimentary tools. Their rhythm echoed the savanna's own, adapting and learning, forming the first chapter in humankind's mastery of open grasslander, lineage destined to write the history of Earth itself. Morning light filtered through scattered trees, breaking into patches on cracked ground, casting speckled glow across yellowed grass. Low shrubs dotted the land, while a few tall trees stood like pillars against the wind, their shadows offering brief refuge. Breezes carried faint moisture left from the night, mingling with the drone of insects and the dry rustle of grass, shaping a living rhythm within the vast space. The half-forest, half-grassland stretched like a stage of survival. Cracked earth and gravel patches alternated with remnants of young grass where moisture lingered beneath leaves. On low ridges, sunlight flared, painting bright patterns against darkened soil. These lights revealed paths, and at times betrayed movements of hidden animals. The space was neither fully open nor fully covered a land offering both concealment, an exposure, shelter and passage, hunting ground and refuge, sound, light, and air shaped the rhythm of life. Every breeze carried signals, every insect tone a record of environment, every pocket of shade a test ground for climbing or fleeing. Stones, thorn thickets, low trees, and broken branches were signs to be read, both obstacles and opportunities for the first steps of Australopithecus. This half-forest, half-grassland was their first great trial, a world where upright walking and climbing had to blend for survival. The ability to watch from open ground, to weave flexibly through shrubs and branches, became lessons repeated across generations. Each measured step, each grasp of a branch, each sweeping glance across the grassland was adaptation, laying the foundation for humankind's first expansion from woodland into arid plains. The new savanna spread like a vast golden carpet, sunlight pouring through scattered shrubs and sparse canopies. Dust drifted in the wind, hovering like dry mist above cracked ridges. Here, every giant species shaped its rhythm. Bands of primitive zebras moved in long files, hoofbeats pounding the hardened earth, grazing on dry grasses or roots. Their steps struck in steady tempo, blending with rustling leaves and swirling dust, the drumbeat of survival on endless plains. Mastodons swept the ground with long tusks, prying into soil for roots and hidden water, leaving pits undisturbed, mounds both food sources and landmarks for others that followed. Footsteps boomed across the savanna, merging with the whistle of wind across ridges, dust rising into veils of motion, a ceaseless rhythm of life. Saber-toothed cats, silent hunters, crouched within grass, bodies drawn tight like strung bows. At the moment of opportunity, they burst forth, striking the weak or the strayed. Giant hyenas traveled in groups, slipping between shrubs, coordinated in scavenging or intercepting stragglers. Low growls, guttural calls, and subtle body signs formed networks of communication, maintaining order, securing the scraps of energy left behind. All moved within harsh laws of survival, where strength, speed, and precision dictated life or death. The landscape was more than an arena of power. Cracked earth, low shrubs, scattered ridges, and sparse canopies shaped a world that both concealed and exposed, both shielded and revealed a land of tests and opportunities, where every step carved a place in the saga of life. Here, a small creature gradually appeared, distinct from all others. Its body had not yet reached the size of the great beasts of the savanna, but its endurance, flexibility, and remarkable adaptability opened a different path, climbing trees for food and safety, while also walking the open ground to explore the grassland. Small, steady footsteps blended into the survival rhythm of the savanna, opening a new chapter in the history of Pliocene life. That creature was the ancestor of humankind, Australopithecus, beginning its first chapter amid the fierce rhythms of the Pliocene. Its small size, yet refined survival strategy, the combination of ground movement and tree climbing, became the key to endurance among giant beasts. Each step was an act of learning, each grasp of a branch or careful rise on tiptoe a test of survival skills, accumulating experience, opening a unique evolutionary branch, and slowly shaping new capacities, environmental awareness, group coordination, and bodily discipline, laying the foundation for a new era of footsteps on the Pliocene. Savanna Australopithecus stood no taller than 1.5 meters. Its skull modest, its face still retaining many ape-like features. That small body emerged in the dry Pliocene savanna, where yellow grass stretched wide, low shrubs dotted the land, and cracked ridges wove a vast canvas of light and shadow. Yet in this world, it carried a fundamental difference: upright legs. The first steps no longer relied on for limbs pressed to the ground, but on 2 firm legs, transferring weight through hips and calf muscles, keeping balance on hardened, fractured soil where each step became a test of survival. Every movement was a trial for a body in transition, feet striking the ground with certainty, heels and toes channeling force, knees adjusting rhythm, hips opening to maintain equilibrium. Long arms and curved fingers remained ready to seize branches when needed, reminders of a forest origin. But the focus now shifted to walking the earth, using the savanna both as a source of food and a vantage ground to observe predators from afar. As sunlight pierced scattered shrubs, casting shifting patterns of brightness and shadow, each step had to adjust in rhythm. Quiet enough not to disturb the soil, alert enough to detect movement in the surroundings. At Latoli, the footprints of Australopithecus remain pressed in ancient volcanic ash, immortal records of evolutionary change. Their shape, firm heels, broad soles, straight toes, told the story of a bipedal ability already secured, while still retaining the flexibility needed for climbing when danger appeared. These footprints were not merely fossil evidence, but the engraved rhythm of survival. Every step, every breath, the balance between walking and climbing, the body's responses to terrain and threats, all reflecting a refined strategy in a harsh environment. Though small, Australopithecus stepped out of the forest's shade and widened its living range, facing giant creatures from mastodons to saber-toothed cats. Bipedal movement conserved energy while freeing the hands to interact with the environment, plucking leaves, picking fruit, testing stones and roots. The arms and shoulders still held strength for grasping and climbing when needed, while the legs provided the stability required for long walks across the savanna. This was the first creature to open a new evolutionary path where the body adapted. The mind began to observe, memorize terrain, learn from risks and food sources, marking the earliest stage of humankind's footsteps on the Pliocene plains. In every step, Australopithecus built a rhythm of independence, moving, observing, exploiting, adapting. Hands could grasp any useful object, from sharp-edged stones to probe or crack nuts, to branches for balance. Feet pressed firmly into the ground. Hips and thighs coordinated with the spine to maintain posture. Eyes scanned far distances, detecting threats or opportunities. This combination created a distinct path for humankind, where flexible movement, keen observation, and environmental adaptation became the keys to survival, laying the foundation for generations to come. The first steps of Australopithecus were not merely motions of travel, but expressions of a body in transition, where evolution fused with landscape. A broad pelvis and firm knees signaled that upright walking had become consolidated. Each step pressed weight evenly across the foot, channeling energy through muscles of the hips, thighs, and calves, keeping balance across rugged, cracked, stony ground. This stability allowed longer journeys, while also liberating the hands to grasp, probe, and interact with the environment, overturning branches, gathering fallen fruit, feeling soil textures to judge stability. Even so, long arms and curved, supple fingers remained, testimony to a forested origin, moving through shrubs, climbing ridges, or gripping tree trunks. The hands acted as counterbalance and support. Each motion of the hand adjusted subtly, maintaining equilibrium, probing for food, testing soil before stepping down or gauging the firmness of branches before climbing higher. This versatility also enabled the picking up of rudimentary tools, sharp stones, small branches, roots used for feeding, expanding survival acts into greater diversity. The body of Australopithecus was a harmony of strength and flexibility. The upper body still strong enough to pull, lift, and cling on fallen trunks, while the lower body steadily adjusted for long steps across dry plains. This was the age of half forest, half grassland, every individual constantly recalibrating posture, force, and step rhythm to move both on earth and among trees when needed. Steps along thorny shrubs, across ridges, or on uneven ground were not only a search for food, but a training of survival skills. Eyes scanning for predators, hands ready to seize, feet pressing firmly to avoid slips or fractures, the body tense, yet agile. The first footsteps also reflected the rhythm of survival and continuous learning. The body had to coordinate perfectly between legs, hips, spine, and arms, while the brain memorized terrain, analyzed risks, predicted next steps, and calculated safe pauses. The balance between climbing and walking stood as clear evidence of half forest, half grassland evolution, where Australopithecus exploited both the open ground and the safety of trees. With each step, each rhythm of movement, the body of Australopithecus learned adaptation, challenging, refining, enduring. Hands no longer only for climbing, feet no longer only for running. The whole body combined strength, agility, and sensitivity. Each step was not simply locomotion, but a sequence of survival acts, opening a new chapter in the history of human earliest footsteps on the earth, where adaptation to a world of half forest and half grassland began shaping an evolutionary lineage that would extend millions of years into the future. On the Pliocene savanna, where dry grass spread golden, dust hung thick, and the sun scorched the earth, survival was more than food, and water it was vigilance, adaptation, and avoidance of giant predators. Australopithecus, with a small yet agile body, practiced refined survival strategies that revealed both instinct and the half-forest, half-grassland evolution in progress. Every act from a step, a swing of the hips, to a motion of the hand bore the imprint of a creature learning to master a vast yet dangerous world. First came the strategy of movement and observation. Each step was calculated with precision. The foot pressed firmly to the ground, hips and knees lifted to maintain balance, eyes scanning along the grassland and the low shrubs to detect danger. Long and flexible arms remained ready to grasp branches, supporting climbing when risk appeared or when fruit and leaves high above were within reach. The gait of Australopithecus was not mere locomotion. It was a rhythm of survival, resonating with the wind whistling through the bushes, with the footsteps of giant beasts, and with the shifting light piercing the canopy. The combination of walking on land and climbing in trees opened a window of survival, allowing a small body to endure among mastodons and saber-toothed cats, while also granting access to food sources unreachable by other species. The second strategy was group movement and dispersal. Australopithecus traveled in small groups, with young protected in the center and the old guiding with accumulated experience. Body signal stilted, shoulders lifted heads, shifts in gait maintained silent communication, reducing the risk of separation without drawing attention. At signs of predators, the group instantly adjusted course. Some climbed into trees, others slipped into thickets or behind ridges, preserving safety while maintaining access to food. This delicate coordination reflected the ability to learn from one another, to memorize terrain, and to anticipate risk, skills vital not only for individual survival but also for transmission to the next generation. The third strategy was the exploitation of diverse food sources. Australopithecus did not rely solely on grass, roots, or fallen fruit, but also reached for leaves, shoots, and fruit high above, beyond the reach of other animals. Long arms and curved fingers enabled gripping branches, stretching upward to pluck leaves or probing twigs. The dual ability to move on land and climb trees created a vast network of foraging, reducing competition with larger herbivores and maximizing scarce resources during the long dry season. In addition, the agile body allowed careful testing of ground and shrubs before stepping down, lowering the risk of treading on snakes or hidden dangers. Finally came the strategy of vigilance and learning from the environment. Each step, each rise onto the toes, each grip of a branch was a test, measuring the ground, determining a safe path, detecting predator movement. Eyes scanned far ahead, discerning subtle changes of shadow, motion, or sound. Hands remained ready to seize a branch, inspect fruit and leaves, or test stones for food or rudimentary tools. The capacity to observe, learn, and memorize terrain allowed individuals to anticipate risks while adjusting behavior for survival. Small groups maintained a constant rhythm of life, moving, watching, climbing, foraging, each act bound directly to the survival of both individual and group. This survival strategy opened a unique evolutionary direction: upright stance, flexible movement, coordinated observation, and exploitation of the environment. Australopithecus was not the ruler of the savanna, yet through the union of bodily strength, flexible limbs, and sharp vigilance, it endured among giant predators, laying the foundation for Homo the species that would later stride farther, wield refined tools, and cultivate superior minds. Each day on the Pliocene savanna was a lesson: moving, climbing, observing, foraging, and avoiding danger. This strategy did not merely ensure survival. It engraved the first rhythm of human existence on open land, where each step was a trial, each breath a survival tactic, and each act an evolutionary lesson carved into body and memory. Australopithecus knew no tools, no fire, and had not yet left Africa. It still lived within the harsh world of the Pliocene savanna, where sunlight scorched the earth, dust hung heavy, and giant beasts moved like living boulders. Yet in its small body, upright legs, and combined ability to walk the ground and climb the trees lay a fundamental difference, one that opened the path for all that would follow. The first steps, though clumsy, marked the primal survival rhythm of humankind, balancing movement, observation, and the mastery of a vast yet perilous world. The upright gait was not merely a posture on the open land. It was a cornerstone in a process stretching across millions of years. Each step of Australopithecus bore the mark of balance, bodily adjustment, terrain, memory, and vigilance. These skills became a precious legacy, inherited and refined by Homo, from predator detection to more effective exploitation of food. Every step was a survival trial, every rise on the toes or grip on a branch a lesson in environment and risk. And each experience was passed into the instincts and learning of generations to come, though it disappeared around 2 million years ago. Australopithecus left a vast legacy, the beginning of humankind. Its vanishing was not an end, but a transition in the evolutionary journey. As climates shifted, grasslands expanded, dry seasons lengthened, and competition with larger herbivores intensified, Australopithecus retreated to refuges or yielded to fast adapting lineages. Harshness grew, pressure mounted, and this lineage reached an evolutionary dead end, giving way to new species better suited to survive. As Australopithecus withdrew, a new line appeared, Homo habilis. This first Homo species was small-bodied, yet with a more developed brain. It began to use simple tools to extract food and defend itself. The upright steps left by Australopithecus were now inherited, refined, and optimized. Walking became paired with the manipulation of tools, foraging expanded, crude shelters were built. Interaction with the environment became systematic. This was an evolutionary leap, as Homo widened its living range, adapted to shifting climates, and prepared for the next advances. Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and finally Homo sapiens. The legacy of Australopithecus did not lie in tools or fire, but in adaptability, environmental awareness, and the survival rhythm formed amid predators and natural dangers. It was the bridge between apes and Homo, the foundation for all that followed. From those first awkward steps, human history began to unfold, setting the stage for intelligence, for tools, for fire, and for civilizations that would rise millions of years later. Every step of Australopithecus whispers a reminder. Evolution is not leaps, but the accumulation of detail, of step upon step, of trial upon trial. From those steps, humans would later stand taller, see farther, and gradually master their world. Though quiet and small, that legacy was immense, the beginning of a journey spanning millions of years. A journey Homo sapiens continues today. The late Pliocene opened into a harsher world, where grasslands stretched like barren golden carpets, interwoven with low shrubs and cracked ridges, creating a canvas of light and shadow shifting with the sun's motion. Sunlight scorched the surface, lifting dust into shimmering veils, trembling with the rhythm of dry winds. Gusts bent tree trunks, rustling leaves into the breath of earth itself, mingling with the heavy steps of giant beasts, mastodons stamping the ground, hyenas slipping through shrubs, saber-toothed cats stalking, prey forming a relentless, violent symphony of survival. Above stretched a clear sky, at times veiled by thin clouds, scattering harsh light across the savanna, asterisk shining upon the yellow grass. Reflecting into the drifting dust, the light created shifting veils of brightness and shadow, as if dancing to the fierce rhythm of the savanna. Water sources on the plain grew scarce, testing the survival of all creatures. Seasonal streams dried up, small lakes shrank until only puddles remained among cracked earth, bitter with salt at the end of the dry season. The surviving trees became makeshift refuges, Their scarce shade offered partial shelter from the burning sun and fine dust suspended in the air. Large herbivores grazed on dry grass, dug for roots buried deep beneath parched soil, leaving footprints, scents, and claw marks, an invisible survival map that every creature had to learn to read. Predators prowled within tall grasses, using color and shadow to conceal their bodies, while raptors plunged suddenly from low branches, forming natural traps filled with risk. The savanna was not merely a place to find food. It was a continuous arena, where every movement had to be measured, from the placing of a foot, to the lifting of hips, to the turning of the head, in constant vigilance against distant threats. In this harsh environment, a creature stood upright. Small-bodied yet agile, Homo habilis began to emerge. Its brain, larger than that of Australopithecus, allowed memory of terrain, prediction of food and water sources, and the refinement of movement strategies with every step. The body remained compact yet sturdy, adapted for longer journeys across dry ground, for climbing when needed, and for wide observation of the environment. The movements of limbs were no longer only for balance, but also for exploration and exploitation, gathering dry grass, probing tree roots, or inspecting stones that might conceal food or danger. The integration of physical motion, cognition, and interaction with the environment became the key to survival in a world still ruled by drought, dust, and predators. The late Pliocene was not merely a backdrop, but an unrelenting trial for Homo habilis, an expanding savanna, dwindling resources, and fierce competition with other species. Each step, each breath, every grip of a branch or lift of a foot reflected processes of learning, adaptation, and invention. This species had to continuously adjust its body and behavior, opening a new evolutionary direction where survival no longer depended solely on strength or speed, but also on nascent intelligence, keen observation, memory, and the earliest use of rudimentary tools to harness the vast world. The late Pliocene savanna, with its burning light, drifting dust, the heavy footsteps of giant beasts, and scattered shadows of low shrubs, became a natural school. Homo habilis began to step out of the shelter of sparse forests, learning to move, to observe, and to survive in the unforgiving plains, laying the foundations for the genus Homo whose descendants would continue to write the grand story of humankind. These early movements were not merely acts of survival, but experiments in a new human form where each bodily gesture, each rhythm of gait, and the coordination of perception, motion, and environment inscribed deep evolutionary marks. The late Pliocene savanna was not simply a barren land of dust and drought, but a living stage of a powerful and diverse community of creatures. Under the burning sun, within dry yellow grasses and drifting haze, wildlife forged a relentless rhythm of survival. Mastodons moved slowly yet firmly, crushing vegetation beneath their feet, leaving deep prints in earthen mounds that became both threats and temporary shade for smaller species. Pliocene horses grazed dry grass and moved in herds, leaping across mounds and tracing pathways between shrubs and thorn bushes, their agile steps guiding Homo habilis to water or warning of predators. Rhinoceroses and antelopes roamed between, risers, feeding on leaves and shoots, competing directly with smaller omnivores, sometimes clashing with force that sent echoes rolling across the plain. Saber-toothed cats stalked from low shrubs, approaching silently with tense muscles and sharp canines, striking suddenly like lightning, embodying predators so formidable that every surrounding creature had to remain alert to each motion. Pliocene genus agile and strategic, hunted in groups or contested carcasses, pressing directly against the survival of Homo habilis and smaller species, their cries and growls blending with footsteps to intensify the savanna's pulse. Great raptorial birds circled above, surveying the entire plain with piercing eyes, wings cutting through the wind, diving to seize young prey or to raise alarm, forcing ground-dwelling animals to dart into cover, while smaller herbivores, such as wild pigs, slipped through shrubs. Small primates leaped among low branches, and rodents vanished into vegetation. Matsat, once prey for predators and agents of seed dispersal, shaping the spread of bushes and new plant cover. Within this brutal contest, Homo habilis stood among giants and hunters, learning to interpret predator movements, navigating carefully through thorn and ridge, climbing trees to avoid danger, searching for water in the dry season, and exploiting food with dexterous hands. The survival rhythm of the savanna, walking, climbing, seeking water, defending, foraging, was not merely a sequence of acts, but an evolutionary lesson where each step, each reach, each watchful glance laid foundations for the further path of Homo, opening the road of survival and adaptation across the vast, unforgiving plain. Homo habilis emerged as a subtle shift from Australopithecus, carrying the marks of its ancestors while opening a new evolutionary path. Its average height rarely exceeded 1.5 meters. Its body remained small yet agile. It retained many ancestral traits: relatively long arms, curved fingers for climbing, flexible shoulders for grasping and arboreal movement. Yet the lower body revealed a clear advance: broader pelvis, sturdier knee joints, longer and stronger feet, supporting more efficient bipedal walking, enabling longer distances across open land with less energy loss, and providing stability across rugged terrain. The skull expanded compared to Australopithecus, especially in the frontal and temporal regions, reflecting an increase in brain volume from about 400 to 500 cubic centimeters in its ancestors to 600 to 750 cubic centimeters. The larger brain not only processed complex environmental information, but also unlocked the capacity to learn, remember, and anticipate survival skills crucial on the unforgiving late Pliocene savanna. Eyes directed forward, with binocular spacing, enhanced depth perception and motion detection, improving the ability to evaluate threats, plan movement strategies, and even navigate toward food or water across vast terrain. This change marked a vital evolutionary step. Homo habilis still retained climbing ability when needed, but its focus shifted to bipedal walking, conserving energy and freeing its hands. Hands were no longer solely for grasping branches, but began to perform more refined actions, holding stones, parting vegetation, experimenting with surrounding objects. These gestures were the first steps toward tool-making, the earliest evidence of deliberate interaction with the environment, moving beyond instinct and toward the beginnings of creativity. The body of Homo habilis reflected a hybrid form, both inheriting climbing strength from Australopithecus and expanding its reach across open land. Its steady steps across dry ground not only allowed access to distant resources, but also reduced the risk of separation from groups, optimizing collective survival. Meanwhile, agile hands and skillful fingers began to open the door to tools, where mind and body merged to interact with the world in unprecedented ways, breaking branches, probing roots, testing stones, initiating the earliest stage of primitive tools. the integration of a larger brain, a lower body adapted for walking, flexible hands, and the ability to learn revealed that Homo habilis was no longer merely existing. It was a creature observing, adjusting behavior and movement, and opening a new evolutionary phase, moving not only to survive, but to exploit, to learn, to craft, and to interact with the world. This progress demonstrated that Homo habilis could memorize complex terrain, anticipate appearances of predators, and the learning of experience from individuals within the group. These elements formed the foundation of an early social intelligence. In the late Pliocene landscape, Homo habilis emerged as a small yet sophisticated being, linking the past of Australopithecus with the future of Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. It marked a new evolutionary rhythm, where body and mind began to converge, opening the history of the first true human footsteps on the vast savanna. From those steps, the first grips, and the tentative interactions with the environment, Homo habilis did more than survive. It began to shape, to observe, and to intact, laying the groundwork for millions of years of further evolution across the late Pliocene savanna, where golden dry grasses stretched endlessly and dust rose into thick veils. Homo habilis had to deploy refined strategies to adapt to a harsh environment and colossal predators. Unlike Australopithecus, it relied not only on a flexible body and climbing ability, but also on primitive intelligence, strategic observation, and group coordination to maximize survival. Each step, each movement of limbs and eyes was synchronized with the surrounding environment, like a symphony of survival woven between searing light and the deep shadows of the grassland. The first strategy was movement and observation. Each bipedal step was calculated, the foot pressed firmly to the ground, knees and hips adjusted for balance. Eyes swept across grass and shrubs to register every shift of shadow or motion, small changes that might reveal a predator. The ability to walk farther enabled Homo habilis to reach scarce food and water, while maintaining distance, observation of threats. Agile hands and dexterous fingers began to use available objects, stone, branch, bonas, rudimentary tools, for cracking fruit, stripping leaves, scraping roots, or defense. The fusion of observation, locomotion, and environmental interaction created a broad window of survival, allowing this small creature to persist among saber-toothed cats, circling hyenas, and mastodon herds. The second strategy was group movement and mutual protection. Homo habilis traveled in small groups, with juveniles shielded in the center and the old guiding with accumulated knowledge. Body signals, tilted shoulders, lifted heads, shifts in gait maintained communication. Without sound, at signs of danger, the group swiftly altered direction, some climbing trees, others vanishing into thorn thickets or ridges, preserving both safety and access to food. This coordination not only lowered the risk of separation, but also fostered the learning of survival experience, the memorization of terrain, and the ability to respond to complex threats. Observing conspecifics, imitating behaviors, and adapting responses gave rise to a form of early social intelligence, where each individual both defended itself and supported group survival. The third strategy was the exploitation of diverse food sources. Homo habilis took advantage of foods difficult for Australopithecus to reach: fruits in higher branches, roots, young leaves, seeds, and even meat from carcasses. Primitive tools, sharp stones, pebbles, firm branches were used to crack, strip, split shells, or tear flesh, expanding resource use. The combination of terrestrial foraging, climbing, and tool use created a broad exploitation network, reducing direct competition with larger herbivores and increasing resilience during extended dry seasons and rapid environmental shifts. The fourth strategy was vigilance and environmental learning. Each rise onto the toes, each grasp of a branch, each manipulation of an object was a test, gauging ground stability, checking wind direction, tracking predator or prey movement, memory of terrain, risk evaluation, assessment of water and food, and prediction of animal behavior allowed Homo habilis to continuously adjust movement and survival strategies. Groups maintained a constant rhythm, moving, observing, foraging, defending, each act directly tied to the survival of both individual and group. The survival strategies of Homo habilis marked a crucial advance. The fusion of bodily adaptation, primitive intelligence, and tool use created a strength far surpassing Australopithecus. It was not the master of the savanna, but through flexibility, precision, and ingenuity, Homo habilis endured among the giants, setting the foundation for Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. Each day on the late Pliocene, savanna was a lesson, observing, moving, climbing, foraging, learning, and defending. These strategies did not merely ensure survival, but carved an evolutionary rhythm where each step, each grip, each act of interaction with the environment became a cornerstone for the long history of humankind. They proved that even in the harshest world, primitive intelligence, sharp observation, and group coordination could open pathways of survival and new evolutionary directions. Homo habilis appeared on the late Pliocene savanna, not only with upright legs and a flexible body, but with an important advance: the active interaction with its surroundings through primitive tools, stones, bones, branches, even carefully chosen pebbles became the first instruments, not innate adaptations, but the outcome of primitive intelligence fused with survival experience. These objects were not merely for food extraction, but extended observation, enhanced defense, increased survival opportunities, and marked the first intellectual advance upon the vast grasslands. The earliest tools were sharp stones, pointed bones, or firm branches used to cut, strip, crack fruit, or break seed shells. With these tools, Homo habilis accessed resources unavailable to other creatures: deep roots beneath dry soil, thick shells of dry seeds, or flesh from the carcasses of large animals. The process of trial and error fostered the ability to evaluate efficiency, the force of impact, the angle of strike, the moment of usal remembered and reapplied. This was the first sign of experiential learning, where causal thinking began to form, sharply distinct from the instinctive responses of Australopithecus. Keen observation, combined with tool use, created a form of practical intelligence. Each object was a test of durability, manipulability, and effectiveness in food extraction. When danger appeared from saber-toothed cats, hyenas, or mastodons, Homo habilis could wield stones, bones, or branches as temporary defenses, throwing, striking, or smashing to create space. Within groups, individuals observed each other's tool use, learning grips and applications of force, transmitting rudimentary survival knowledge. This process formed group lessons, enhancing coordination, flexibility, risk prediction, and environmental interaction. Tool use also expanded survival range and food strategies. With stones, branches, and bones, Homo habilis reached inaccessible foods, reduced competition with large herbivores, and secured diverse nutrition through prolonged dry seasons. The acts of gripping, stripping, striking, pounding, and throwing tools simultaneously refined hand-foot dexterity, eye-hand coordination, and spatial memory, laying the groundwork for later Homo's intellectual progress. Tools ceased to be mere objects. They became extensions of survival strategy, merging observation, learning, and direct environmental manipulation to create unprecedented advantages. The enlarged brain, coupled with the ability to actively interact with the world through tools, opened a new rhythm of existence. Homo habilis no longer merely reacted to its environment, but began to intervene, to experiment, and to form the first causal rules. This marked the transition from pure instinct to nascent thought, where survival and creation walked side by side, where every object, every act became part of the strategy of existence. In the late Pliocene landscape, Homo habilis emerged as a small yet sophisticated being, standing upright upon the savanna, observing, moving, climbing, extracting food, and shaping tools. Each step, each grip, each strike and mark formed a new rhythm of survival, paving the way for Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and the long chain of intellectual, technological, and cultural progress that followed. From crude stones, dry branches, and scattered bones, Homo habilis began writing the earliest chapters of creative history, where mind and body converged, laying the foundation for humankind's grand evolutionary journey, transforming a harsh world into a proving ground for adaptability and thought. Homo habilis did not exist alone upon the late Pliocene savanna. Its survival depended on the ability to coordinate in groups and to learn from the surrounding environment. Small groups, often composed of adults, juveniles, and elders, formed a primitive social network where each act and each bodily signal carried the weight of survival. This coordination not only defended the group against predators, but also transmitted knowledge and experience, an essential step in human evolutionary history. The first group strategy was protection and positional order. Juveniles moved in the center, encircled by adults, while elders guided and observed from higher vantage points, holding accumulated knowledge of movement, foraging, and recognizing danger signs, bodily signals, shoulder tilts, head lifts, changes. Gait transmitted information without sound, reducing the risk of detection by predators. At signs of danger, the group swiftly altered direction, some climbing trees, others disappearing into thorn thickets or earthen mounds, while preserving the protective structure around the young and maximizing survival chances. Adults also held positions along the group's outer edge to monitor and respond quickly to threats, forming a belt of vigilance, a sophisticated defensive strategy, refined by millions of years of survival experience. Communication within the group was not only for defense, but also for learning. Young individuals observed adult behaviors, how to use stone to cut, branches to strip leaves, how to exploit difficult food sources, and even how to choose resting places and shade from the harsh sun. Through imitation, juveniles accumulated experience, learned hand-eye coordination, tracked prey movements, and assessed predator threats. The group became a living school, where each journey, each movement, each manipulation of tools was a practical lesson, shaping causal reasoning, spatial memory, and learning through experience. This was the earliest foundation of cultural tradition, where knowledge and skill existed not only within individuals, but were shared among members. This cooperative and learning strategy also expanded the range of survival. Groups of Homo habilis could exploit food more effectively, from fruits in high branches, to roots and leaves, to meat from carcasses, resources far beyond the reach of solitary individuals. When one member discovered a food source or successfully evaded a predator, information spread through observation, bodily signals, and even tool locations left within the environment, enabling the group to replicate and refine survival strategies. This was the first step in forming collective intelligence, the ability to learn, remember, transmit, and coordinate in order to survive, preparing later Homo lineages for more complex communication. These skills also contributed to the emergence of basic rituals, choosing resting places, hunting strategies, food sharing, and selecting travel routes, reflections of sophisticated coordination that transcended mere instinct. In the harsh environment of the late Pliocene savanna, each day was a lesson: movement, observation, resource use, defense, and the transmission of experience. Homo habilis survived through the coordination of an adaptive body, nascent intelligence, and refined group strategies. Social relationships not only shielded individuals, but also formed the basis for intergenerational learning, the earliest imprint of protoculture, where experience was remembered, repeated, and improved across generations. The ability to observe conspecific behavior, combined with communication through nonverbal signals, created a model of continuous learning, broadening survival strategies and increasing adaptability to a demanding environment. The group strategies and learning of Homo habilis marked a critical advance. Survival was no longer an individual struggle, but a coordinated act where nascent intelligence, subtle communication, and continual learning opened the path towards social development. Refined tools and heightened intellect in later Homo species. Each step across the savanna, each flex of fingers, each bodily signal inscribed a trace of history, clearing the way for Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, the successors who would continue to write the great story of humankind. Homo habilis, with a small frame, a brain larger than Australopithecus, bipedal movement, and nascent intellect, opened a new chapter in human evolution. It could not yet craft advanced tools or master fire, but its steps, its crude manipulations of tools, and its group rhythms forged a vital legacy, the foundation for Homo erectus, the first true Homo to step beyond the bounds of instinct, moving toward environmental control and the expansion of survival territory. This legacy was not merely the result of body or intellect alone, but the resonance of body, early thought, and interaction with a harsh environment. The first legacy was a body adapted for movement across the savanna. Homo habilis maintained steady bipedal gait, freeing its hands for manipulation and tool use. The ability to travel farther, observe wider, and climb when needed gave flexibility surpassing Australopithecus. Long steps across dry ground, reaching through brush, or climbing to pluck fruit, not only ensured survival, but also shaped a spatial map within memory, the capacity to navigate, recall terrain, and anticipate risks, which would become indispensable for Homo erectus in the first migrations out of Africa. Alongside this, the body of Homo habilis displayed a delicate balance between energy devoted to movement and to mental activity, a trait Homo erectus would later exploit in long journeys and coordinated hunts. The second legacy was practical, intelligence and tool use. Homo habilis learned to select, grasp, and act upon stone, bone, or branch to extract food and defend itself. In doing so, It grasped causal relationships, force, angle, material, and outcome. This ability, though primitive, laid the groundwork for Homo erectus to develop more sophisticated stone tools, heightening hunting efficiency, butchery, and food preparation, while expanding survival into harsher environments. Tools ceased to be mere aids. They became extensions of body and mind, enabling Homo habilis to intervene more deeply in its environment, to broaden survival, and to craft complex strategies of exploitation. The third legacy was group strategy, communication, and learning. Homo habilis had formed basic social relationships, positional organization, juvenile protection, observation of adult behavior, and the transfer of experience through bodily signals. This intergenerational learning not only improved survival rates, but also laid the foundation for protoculture, the beginnings of collective intelligence. Homo erectus would inherit this capacity for group coordination, optimize hunting strategies and migration patterns, and develop more complex forms of communication. Thanks to Homo habilis, knowledge no longer resided only within individuals, but began to accumulate within the collective, preparing the ground for the emergence of more intricate social structures among later Homo. At last, Homo habilis left behind a legacy of rhythm and thought. The first steps upon the savanna, the grasp of fingers, the acts of observing and interacting with the environmental created a distinctive rhythm of survival, a fusion of body, nascent intellect, and landscape. This was the foundation for Homo erectus, the first of the genus Homo, able to travel tens, even hundreds of kilometers, adapting to environments ranging from arid savannas to open woodland and river margins, preparing for the next advances that would lead toward Homo sapiens. Homo habilis laid the first stones for planning, coordination, and the formation of long-term survival strategies, elements that distinguished Homo erectus from its pre-Homo ancestors. The legacy of Homo habilis, though quiet, was immense. It marked the transition from solitary survival to strategic survival, from pure instinct to nascent thought, from small steps, crude stones, and non-verbal signals. Homo habilis established the foundation for Homo erectus, the lineage that would step beyond Africa, expand territory, master tools, refine social strategies, and ultimately continue the great story of humankind across the earth. This was the moment when human history shifted from instinct toward the beginnings of intellect, opening an evolutionary rhythm that stretched over millions of years toward Homo sapiens. The Pleistocene, spanning from about 2.58 million to 11,700 years ago, was an age of ice and relentless upheaval. Earth in this time bore a severe and layered visage, shaped by successive glacial and interglacial cycles, like the slow yet violent breaths of the planet. Each glacial epoch spread vast sheets of ice, engulfing continents. Each brief interglacial pulled them back, revealing savannas, rivers, and forests only, for the ice to seize the land once more. In the north, ice sheets several kilometers thick stretched like walls of silver light, covering nearly all of northern Europe, Siberia, and North America. The glaciers moved with ponderous strength, grinding mountains, flattening plains, carving U-shaped valleys, and leaving behind scarred land. When temporary warmth arrived, melting ice unleashed colossal floods, cutting new rivers and forming vast lake traces of the collisions between water and stone. Many remain today, mirrors reflecting the memory of the Ice Age. South of the ice lay one of the greatest ecosystems ever to exist, the Mammoth Step, from Western Europe, across Siberia, over the Bering Land Bridge into North America, this grassland unfolded like a boundless ocean. Upon the frozen ground, northern winds swept across a landscape of short grasses, thorny shrubs, and hardy wildflowers clinging to survival. In winter, snow spread as a harsh white carpet, but rarely so deep that grazing animals could not uncover roots and dry grasses beneath. In the brief summer, the land erupted in color, hundreds of plant species flowering in mere weeks, providing rich energy for woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, steppe bison, wild horses, and reindeer. This was the foundation of a vast ecosystem of predators, scavengers, and early humans. The climate of the Pleistocene was harsh not only for its cold, but for its abrupt, unpredictable change. A glacial epoch might last tens of thousands of years, but an interglacial could swiftly return forests within a few millennia, spreading through temperate regions, concealing the steppe, and displacing cold-adapted creatures. This alternation forced life into constant adaptation. Herds migrated with the seasons and climatic pulses, predators expanded their ranges, and early hominin groups honed their mobility, tool-making, and resource use. Species unable to keep pace with the turning of ice and wind vanished forever, leaving space for new forms to rise. On high mountain ranges, ice mantled the summits, flowing downward as colossal glaciers that carved valleys with brutal majesty. At their feet, lowlands became barren tundra, where only lichens, mosses, and dwarf shrubs endured. In more temperate latitudes, open woodland alternated with steppe, forming survival corridors for predators, grazers, and, increasingly, primitive humans, those who learned to hunt, gather, and seek shelter upon a planet in perpetual flux. The Pleistocene, therefore, was not merely an age of ice. It was an age of planetary reconstruction, where wind, ice, water, and grassland ceaselessly rewrote the Earth's form. Every river, every valley, every plain bore the imprint of glacial cycles. Within this severe and shifting stage, early humanity gradually emerged, expanded territories, and learned to endure in the unending trial of nature. It was within the Pleistocene that the foundation was set for the global dispersal of Homo sapiens, upon a planet that never ceased to change in the harsh tableau of the Pleistocene. Animals were living fragments, shaping both the ecosystem of the Mammoth Step and the evolutionary future of humankind. This was the age of giants, the Megafauna creatures adapted to the cold. Massive in body, clad in thick fur or deep fat layers, and bearing a rare diversity. They were not only rulers of the steppe, but also sources of food, material, and competition for the rising Homo sapiens. Asterisk. The woolly mammoth, Mammothus primigenius, stood as the emblem of the Pleistocene, with bodies up to 3 to 4 meters tall, draped in dark brown fur, and shielded by thick fat beneath the skin. These animals roamed the Mammoth Steppe in herds. Their enormous curved tusks were tools for breaking snow and uncovering food, and weapons in contests of survival. Their presence shaped landscapes. Moving in groups, they trampled paths through the steppe, opening ways for other creatures. Later, mammoth bones and tusks became vital to human tools, weapons, and art. Alongside the mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros Coelotus was another iconic survivor, with a massive body, shaggy coat, and the distinctive long curved horn. It endured across the cold steppes of Eurasia. Fossil traces reveal its wide range across Siberia, where it grazed grasses, mosses, and low shrubs, maintaining ecosystem balance. In the depths of winter, its great horns scraped snow aside to uncover forage, making it a pathfinder for other herbivores. Steppe bison, priscus, and wild horses, Equus feris, moved in great herds across the Pleistocene plains. The bison, powerful and enduring, provided immense energy for predators and for early humans. Wild horses, with short but sturdy legs, sustained long migrations across open grasslands. Their movements shaped the paths of human migration as seasonal food sources intertwined with their journeys. Wild horses later opened the path toward domestication, laying the groundwork for humanity's long bond with animals, in the shadows of sparse forests or upon the icy plains. Apex predators reigned: the cave lion Panthora, Leospelea larger than modern lions, hunted in groups, capable of bringing down bison and horses. The saber-toothed cats, Smilodon and Homotherium, with their dagger-like canines, embodied evolutionary power, ambushing large prey. Cavihyaenas crocuta, Speleea, both scavengers and hunters, left shattered bones in many European caves, and towering among them, the cave bear Ursus, Ispeleo's colossal, omnivorous, dwelling long in stone shelters, leaving layers of bones across hundreds of generations, stood as a lasting testament to Ice Age life in the frozen tundra. The reindeer, Rangifer tarandus, and the giant deer Megaloceros giganteus, were two emblematic grazers. The reindeer was a migratory creature, bound to seasonal rhythms, moving from summer grasslands to winter tundra. The giant deer bore antlers that spread more than 3 meters wide, one of the most majestic figures of the Pleistocene, yet also a burden when climates shifted and food grew scarce. The shed antlers, left behind after each season, became a vital raw material for early tools. Beyond the giants, the Pleistocene preserved the presence of smaller but equally important species: Arctic hares, Arctic foxes, grey wolves, and many birds of prey formed a layered ecological web, from the flocks of migratory birds that filled the summer sky to the polar bears, Ursus maritimus, that appeared along the icy northern coasts, all contributed to the weaving of a complex biological tapestry. In lakes and rivers fed by melting glaciers, salmon, sturgeon, and other aquatic species provided steady sources of protein for ancient humans. These key animals were not merely elements of an ecosystem. They were challenges, opportunities, and resources for Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and ultimately Homo sapiens. Hunting, symbiosis, and competition with these species forged adaptability, shaped tools, refined skills, and awakened imagination factors that brought humanity to the threshold of civilization. The emergence of Homo sapiens was recorded not only in behavior and tools, but also etched deeply into bodily form, a structure long sculpted by evolution, refined across hundreds of thousands of generations to confront a turbulent environment. From the sun-scorched savannas of East Africa to the ice-bound tundras of Eurasia, this morphology carried both the memory of ancient ancestors and the innovations that allowed this lineage to become the sole surviving branch of the genus Homo. The body of Homo sapiens was slender, with common height ranging from 160 to 180 centimeters, and bones lighter and finer than those of Homo neanderthalensis. In evolutionary terms, such slenderness was not weakness but advantage. Moderate musculature enabled efficient thermoregulation under the relentless heat of Africa, where sunlight stretched unbroken across the land. When the lineage moved northward into cold environments, The same body plan proved flexible enough to adapt through fur clothing, fire, and social strategy. The straight torso, narrow chest, and balanced shoulders and hips formed an architecture optimized for endurance, ruining a rare trait among mammals. Homo sapiens could walk tens of kilometers without pause, or pursue an animal until it collapsed. From exhaustion, the skull marked the most profound shift. Whereas Homo erectus and Neanderthals bore long crania, low foreheads, and wide cheekbones, Homo sapiens had a high forehead, rounded skull vault, flatter face, and projecting chin. This was a unique morphological hallmark, absent in any other Homo, with a brain volume averaging 1,350 to 1,450 cubic centimeters, no greater than that of Neanderthals. Its internal organization was distinct. The frontal lobes expanded, linked to abstract thought, foresight, complex tool-making, and social organization. The rounded cranial vault allowed the brain to distribute more evenly, avoiding the spatial constraints of the elongated Neanderthal skull. The chin's development, small yet significant, supported precise articulation, enabling a wider range of sounds. From this refinement, language expanded, surpassing simple signals, opening the path to myth, ritual, and collective memory. Language became an invisible tool, more powerful than any spear. The hands of Homo sapiens evolved into living instruments. The opposable thumb, flexible joints, and refined musculature permitted precision far beyond earlier hominins. In the hands of Homo habilis, stone was merely broken. In those of Homo erectus, it became a hand axe. But in Homo sapiens, stone, bone, wood, and sinew were transformed into a diverse system of tools: throwing spears, bows, sewing needles, fishing hooks. This dexterity also opened the way to engraving, cave painting, and ornament-making marks of existence that transcended survival, affirming identity. The legs of Homo sapiens were long, with slender shanks, granting efficient strides across great distances. The arched foot absorbed impact, enabling day-long travel over rugged terrain without collapse. These were the legs of a persistent wanderer, carrying the lineage from Africa to every corner of the earth. In the Pleistocene, as great herds moved through grasslands and sparse forests, these legs were irreplaceable tools, carrying Homo sapiens into Siberian ice fields and Middle Eastern deserts alike. At the center of every advantage was the brain, not its mass alone, but its organization. The prefrontal cortex expanded, governing long-term thought, complex decisions, and behavioral flexibility. The Broca and Wernicke areas linked to language achieved unprecedented refinement, unlocking communication through signs and words, then into structured speech. This brain did more than adapt humanity to nature. It created culture, a form of collective adaptation transmitted through social memory. Not only genetic inheritance, thus, the body of Homo sapiens was not merely bone and muscle, it was an evolutionary architecture, finely balanced, strong enough to track prey, flexible enough to craft tools, deft enough to sew hides into clothing, and complex enough to weave symbols, rituals, and myths. Each detail bore the imprint of natural selection, step by step, paving the way for Homo sapiens to become a global species in the Pleistocene. Homo sapiens carried not only a distinct morphology, but also survival strategies, more diverse and intricate than any human lineage before. These strategies were forged over tens of thousands of years in volatile environments, from Africa's wind-swept savannas to Eurasia's frozen tundras. Every action, every technique contributed to a system of adaptation in which mobility, hunting, water seeking, and shelter building interwove into a sustainable chain of survival. The ability to travel long distances with endurance became the foundation of existence. Small groups often walked tens of kilometers in a single day, following animal herds or searching for rare water sources in the dry season. Long strides, slender bodies, and efficient heat regulation enabled superiority in persistence hunting, a strategy rare among mammals. This advantage allowed modern humans to gradually expand from Africa, crossing the Middle East, entering Europe and Asia, and eventually reaching the Americas and Australia. Each migration was both a biological and cultural trial, demanding physical resilience, environmental insight, and group coordination. These journeys were not merely distant wanderings, but irreversible steps of a lineage extending its reach across the globe. The hunting strategies of Homo sapiens surpassed those of Homo erectus or Neanderthals. Strength lay not in muscle but in intellect and organization. Hunting became a coordinated ritual of strategy. Groups chose tactics suited to each species, ambushing in narrow valleys, driving herds toward stone traps, or pursuing prey until heat exhaustion overcame it. Key animals in the diet included antelope, wild horses, bison, mammoths, woolly, rhinoceroses, reindeer, and along coasts, seals, small whales, and marine fish. Stone tools sharpened, wooden spears tipped with stone points, otlots for and later the bow and arrow will opened the possibility of striking from a safe distance, minimizing risks to the hunting group. Hunting did not yield meat alone. The entire animal body was used, hides for cloaks and tents, bones and antlers for tools, sinew for cord, fat for light within dark caves. Nothing was wasted. In a harsh environment, survival depended on transforming every part into a resource. This practice reflected not only ingenuity, but also the foundations of a resource economy in which every element of nature was converted into sustenance. Across steppes and semi-deserts, the search for water became a matter of life and death. Groups of Homo sapiens followed the movements of herds, the sudden gathering of birds, or the faint green patches that marked underground streams or hidden ponds. In the north, snow and ice became temporary water supplies, though their use demanded endurance against bitter cold. Knowledge passed down through generations formed an ecological memory, the time when glaciers melted, when springs resurfaced, where roots stored hidden moisture beneath barren ground. This capacity for observation, memory, and transmission allowed the species to maintain a migratory network across continents. Without collapse before drought or ice, shelter revealed a fundamental difference. Where Homo erectus had relied mainly on caves, Homo sapiens actively constructed living space. Tents of animal hides stretched across mammoth bones. Camps raised from wood and dry grasses became mobile bases along the journey of migration. In colder regions, caves were still used but often modified with stone walls, hide coverings, and hearths to trap warmth. Fire was not only for heat, but also to cook food, harden spear points, and guard against predators. The ability to maintain flame through changing seasons, and to prepare dry fuel in advance, reflected organization and foresight unseen in earlier humans. Creativity in building shelters opened the way toward early notions of environmental control. Homo sapiens prepared before harsh winters, storing food, reinforcing tents, arranging stores of fuel wood and marrow-rich bones to sustain fire. This ability transformed modern humans into a lineage that survived not only through passive adaptation, but through actively reshaping the conditions around them. All elements long distance travel to expand reach. Sophisticated hunting for protein and raw materials, water seeking to endure drought, and shelter to resist winter were bound into a complete system of adaptation. Through this interwoven strategy, Homo sapiens not only endured the challenges of the Pleistocene, but rose as the sole surviving branch of the genus Homo. It was not mere survival, but the beginning of a long dominion of a species that combined body, intellect, and culture into one survival strategy in the Pleistocene. The difference of Homo sapiens lay not in muscle or sharp fangs, but in the absolute exploitation of intellect. The enlarged brain, with an expanded frontal lobe, enabled long-term memory, projection of futures, and visions of things beyond present reality. This capacity turned tools into extensions of the body, transforming the entire mode of survival. In conquest of environments, the earliest tools still echoed the dual-faced hand axes of Homo erectus. Yet Homo sapiens went further. Stone was chosen deliberately. Flint, obsidian, or silica-rich, rocks hard, yet brittle, predictable in fracture. Blade technology produced long, uniform flakes, opening an arsenal of new tools. Butchering knives, piercing points, hide scrapers, grass-cutting blades. Precision allowed the slicing of meat into clean strips, the careful shaving of hides without tearing, and the shaping of bone and antler into forms of unmatched refinement. Confronted with giant beasts, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, aurochs, Homo sapiens invented to overcome physical disadvantage. Stone-tipped spears extended the arm, but the breakthrough was the spear thrower, the otlot. With this lever, throwing distance multiplied and penetration reached through thick hides. In many regions, the bow and arrow appeared, a leap in hunting strategy. Arrows flew swiftly, fired in succession, wearing down prey without close pursuit. Thus Homo sapiens turned distance into advantage, and herds into steady resources of flesh and hide. Fire, once used by Homo erectus mainly for cooking, became a versatile instrument. It increased nutritional value, reduced parasites, but also hardened wood, cracked stone along intended lines, and preserved food through smoking. In hunts, controlled fire drove animals from thickets or funneled them into valleys. Against the Pleistocene cold, fire was an invisible wall, extending habitation into once forbidden lands. Toolmaking was inseparable from social structure. Homo sapiens orchestrated complex hunting scenarios, driving groups, ambush teams, toolmakers, and carcass processors. Pits were dug, canyons chosen, barriers raised from wood and stone. This superiority was not in the body, but in the imagination of sequences yet to occur, and in collective coordination. Strategy revealed a mind that transcended the present, calculating consequences and reshaping space into an instrument of the hunt. It was this union of dexterous hand and abstract brain that transformed Homo sapiens from a creature adapting to the world into a force altering it. A chipped blade, a kept flame, a spear flying through the airage was more than technique. Each was a testament to intellect's rise. Every tool reflected creative thought. Every hunt was the product of foresight. From this point, Homo sapiens ceased to merely endure nature and began to restructure it for enduring survival. In the Pleistocene, Homo sapiens did not exist as isolated individuals. The greatest strength of the species lay in the ability to bind into community, to maintain flexible social structures, and to transmit knowledge across generations. On cold steppes or dry woodlands, no single human could hunt large beasts or endure long winters. But in groups, through sharing and cooperation, a new advantage emerged. Unmatched by any other creature, great herds bison, wild horses, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses outmatched any single human in strength and speed. Only coordinated organization allowed confrontation. Small groups formed in circling lines, driving animals toward narrow valleys, cliffs, or pre-dug traps. Some pursued closely, creating pressure, while others lay in wait at escape routes. Each individual knew its role, turning risk into feasibility. At times, terrain itself was harnessed. Gorges, swamps, cliffs became natural traps, reducing danger. To the hunters. Group strategy extended beyond hunting into daily survival. One group sought water, another gathered roots and berries, others maintained fire and shelter. The division was fluid, shifting with season, circumstance, and abundance. In rains, the task was to guard camps from flooding. In droughts, to seek distant springs. This rhythm of coordination enabled Homo sapiens to expand habitat from Africa's tropical woodlands to Europe's frozen tundra. The essential difference between Homo sapiens and earlier species lay in communication. Their language was not merely scattered sounds, but structured, capable of describing events, predicting outcomes, and to anticipate and to convey abstract notions. During hunts, signals of voice, cries, or gestures of the hand enabled precise coordination in moments that lasted only seconds. After the hunt, language became a tool to recount events, analyze mistakes, extract lessons, and transmit methods to the next generation. Thus, memory was no longer confined to a single individual, but became the shared possession of the group. A stone flaking technique, a migration route following herds, or the recognition of animal traxel were preserved within collective memory. This was the foundation for the emergence of culture, the factor that transformed Homo sapiens from a biological species into a social one. Every invention of an individual, whether a sharper spearhead, a new method of hafting stone onto wood, or the tactic of using fire to drive or direct animals, did not vanish with that individual's death. Instead, it was received, tested, modified, and refined by the group. Knowledge thus accumulated, forming a store of experience that grew ever larger. Homo sapiens did not need to begin again in each generation, but advanced upon the foundations already laid. The early rituals around fire, the paintings upon cave walls, and the tools preserved within clans stood as testimony to this inheritance. Learning was not mere imitation, but an active process, asking, answering, teaching, even verifying. This was the path that opened toward civilization, a process without precedent in evolutionary history. It was the coordination of individual intellect with collective strength that elevated Homo sapiens to an unprecedented position. A lion or tiger might surpass any single human in strength, yet no pride or pack could rival the alliance of Homo sapiens. Each individual was a link, and when joined together, they formed a network not only of hunters, but of creators, preservers, and guardians of knowledge carried through thousands of generations. The true strength of Homo sapiens lay not in muscle, but in shared memory, in the ability to turn a small invention into collective heritage, and in extending the life of the group through common knowledge. In the Pleistocene, Homo sapiens lived among a world of giant and dangerous creatures. The survival of the species depended not only on defense or hunting, but on reading the behavior of other animals, knowing when to confront, when to avoid, and when to exploit indirect connections. The interaction between Homo sapiens and animals created a chain of two-way ecological pressures, where humans affected animals, and animals in turn shaped the strategies of human survival. Predatory threat was constant. The icy plains and wide grasslands held not only herds of great herbivores, but also silent hunters tracking every movement. Cave lions, Pleistocene leopards, the giant hyena, Pachacrota, and the ancestral wolf all possessed the power to bring down a human if encountered at a disadvantage. On snow or dry grass, one moment of carelessness could turn Homo sapiens into prey. Thus, vigilance was unceasing. Footprints pressed into mud, the stench of carrion lingering on the wind. The faint stir of branches each was read as a signal of danger. The ability to detect predator signs became a vital skill, nearly instinctual, honed across generations, in the opposite direction. Homo sapiens exerted immense pressure upon the great herds. Giant bison, northern reindeer, wild horses, mammoths, woolly rhinoceros species, long accustomed to facing wolves or lions, confronted a new kind of enemy, one not relying on speed or muscle, but on endurance, organization, and weapons. A hunt was not a brief chase, but a long pursuit in which Homo sapiens trailed prey for hours or even days, until the massive body weakened. Flint-tipped spears, blazing fire, and pits concealed along migration paths turned humans into a force no solitary animal could withstand. Beyond direct confrontation lay indirect exploitation and strategic observation. Homo sapiens read the behavior of animals to find resources. Circling ravens revealed carrion, hyenas scattered bones, exposed marrow. The migration paths of mammoths pointed to distant water. By following, analyzing, and harnessing animal activity, humans expanded survival without needing to search the vast landscape blindly. Some relationships went further than opportunistic use, approaching avoidance or even indirect symbiosis. Small wolf packs or lone wolves, drawn to human traces, fed on discarded scraps while unintentionally serving as sentinels. Their howls echoed across the night steppe, signaling the presence of other predators. Strange disturbances roused human vigilance. This tenuous connection, born from chance overlap, may have been the first step toward the enduring, complex bond between humans and dogs. Across millennia, interaction with animals shaped both intellect and culture of Homo sapiens. Every wound from tooth or claw became a lesson etched into collective memory. Every successful hunt a ritual in teaching. Every animal trace deciphered upon the ground a fragment of preserved knowledge, from fear of predators to cooperative hunting of giant herds, to watching birds and small mammals for signs of food, all accumulated into a vast ecological understanding. By this, Homo sapiens not only survived, but gradually imposed its mark upon the entire animal world of the Ice Age, opening a new chapter in Earth's biological history, where one primate lineage not only adapted but redefined the balance of the food web in the darkness of caves, upon the cold limestone walls. Traces of black charcoal and red ochre bore the earliest testimony to the spiritual life of Homo sapiens. Animals became central figures in this symbolic treasury. Carvings and paintings of bison herds, wild horses, mammoths, or woolly rhinoceroses reflected more than the living environment. they revealed a world of thought surpassing immediate survival. Animals were at once sustenance and threat, yet also models of strength and endurance. When Homo sapiens magnified curving horns, elongated tusks, or thick manes, animal forms became signs both concrete and symbolic. Each image might serve as a record of a hunt, a lesson for the young, or a ritual invocation before venturing into the uncertain steppe. The repetition of animal motifs across caves in Europe, Africa, and Asia spoke to the universality of an early spiritual culture in which animals stood as bridges between the tangible world and the realm of imagination, not only in visual art, but also in archaeological remains. Deeper ties between animals and ritual are revealed. Within ash layers, animal bones sometimes appear deliberately arranged as part of ceremony. Lion teeth, bear claws, or raptor bones were strung into necklaces, both adornment and symbol. Feathers or hides attached to spears and cloaks may have signified strength, swiftness, or sacred power that groups sought to embody. This was not merely the use of available materials, but the first step toward totemism, the belief that each human group possessed a spirit animal protector, dwelling both in imagination and in collective action. This spiritual culture was bound tightly to daily survival. Before hunts of mammoth, bison, or predators, rituals may have focused the group, reinforcing cohesion and trust in success. A painting of a horse rearing on a cave wall could become a sign for the group to unite toward a common aim. Animal-centered rituals were not only supernatural gestures, but also a social instrument, a way to organize, to maintain order, and to create collective memory within the harsh world of the Pleistocene. Outside the caves, traces of spiritual culture also appeared in the way Homo sapiens dealt with death. In certain burials, animal bones were placed together with the human body, as if the presence of animals accompanied the journey into another realm. This revealed that animals were not only a source of food, but also bound to symbols of rebirth, death, and the cycles of life across thousands of years. Those symbols accumulated into a dense layer of memory, passed down from generation to generation. When Homo sapiens entered the Holocene, this spiritual legacy did not disappear. It became the foundation for religion, art, and symbolic consciousness in later humanity. The horses carved upon the walls of Lascaux, the necklaces of animal bones, the feathers fixed to spear shafts were no longer mere images of Pleistocene life. They stood as testimony to a turning point, the moment when Homo sapiens did not only live within nature, but began to construct a universe of meaning where animals were both sustenance and sacred symbol, sowing the seeds for future systems of belief and civilization. The mark left by Homo sapiens in the Pleistocene lay not only in endurance amid ice and cold, but in the first foundations of modern humanity. Every skill forged in this era became a stone set in the groundwork for the emergence of society, culture, and civilization. First, the greatest legacy of Homo sapiens was adaptive intelligence. The enlarged brain did not merely preserve hunting skills or predator avoidance, but developed capacities for foresight, memory, and long-term planning. In sparse forests or frozen grasslands, every step required calculation, every hunt demanded coordination. This constant pressure honed abstract thought, collective memory, and projection into the future. From these abilities, Homo sapiens no longer relied solely on instinct, but on accumulated experience and teaching. Knowledge of herd movements, the migration of antelope, the hidden traces of predators all were remembered and passed on to later generations. This was the beginning of continuous cultural learning, a trait unseen in any earlier Homo lineage. Second, Homo sapiens left a legacy of tools and techniques. Stone was not only flaked, but ground, shaped into thin blades, finely balanced points, creating implements more sophisticated than any prior stage. Spears were lengthened and balanced, reinforced with sinew and hide, hurled with greater force. Fire, once only for warmth and cooking, became an instrument of landscape management, burning grasslands, clearing paths, driving predators, shaping hunting grounds. Materials were more varied: bone, ivory, wood, horn, even shells and minerals. This combination did more than create weapons and tools. It opened an entirely new way of thinking, the will to alter nature rather than passively adapt. This was the true foundation of later crafts, agriculture, pottery, metallurgy, and complex technologies. Third, social organization was the key legacy of Homo sapiens. Survival was no longer an individual struggle, but a collective structure. Within groups, food was shared, roles divided. The strong hunted, the skilled crafted, the knowledgeable gathered plants, the experienced guided paths. The young and the old were cared for, not abandoned as burdens, but preserved as living memory and repositories of knowledge. This cohesion formed the earliest sense of responsibility and community. Upon this base, language grew richer, symbols emerged, and primitive beliefs took shape, the earliest seeds of culture and religion. Beyond this, Homo sapiens left an ecological legacy of decisive consequence. In the course of hunting, the species became one of the strongest forces acting upon populations of large animals. The spread of Homo sapiens coincided with the decline of many giant mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, saber-toothed, cats-driven, partly by climate change, partly by the pressure of efficient hunting strategies. This was the earliest sign that Homo sapiens did not merely live within the biosphere, but could reshape and alter the balance of ecosystems. At first, this impact was confined to grasslands and cold forests. Later, it would expand into agriculture, animal husbandry, and eventually urbanization. Finally, the deepest legacy was the capacity for imagination and symbolic creation. In the dark of caves, charcoal lines and mineral pigments shaped the silhouettes of herds, handprints, enigmatic signs. These were not random markings, but evidence of symbolic thought, the beginning of art, belief, and complex language. The animal paintings of Chauvet, Lascaux, or Altamira, the carved bones, the pierced shells worn as ornaments all testified that Homo sapiens had crossed the boundary of biology to enter the realm of meaning and faith. Thus, the legacy of Homo sapiens in the Pleistocene was a weaving of adaptive intelligence, tools and techniques, social organization, ecological impact, and symbolic creativity. Each layer of legacy did not exist in isolation, but intertwined and reinforced one another, generating a distinct power. From this foundation, Homo sapiens emerged from the Ice Age, entered the Holocene, and opened a new chapter where humanity was no longer merely one species among many, but a force capable of shaping the entire planet.